Welcome. My name is Dan Rift, and I want to welcome you on behalf of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which we often call the ELCA, and Lutheran Disaster Response, often abbreviated as LDR, for a brief conversation on the church in action in light of the hostilities and the humanitarian crisis in Eastern Europe and specifically in Ukraine. I want to welcome you and thank you for your time and for your attention today. I'm joined first today by Pastor Rachel Eskison, who is our program director for the work and the mission work in Eastern Europe and across Europe. And Rachel has been kind of frontline for us living in Budapest, Hungary, and what's been going on in response to the recent crises in the area. Welcome, Rachel. I want to start with a question about what have you been seeing on the ground? What have you been experiencing in the midst of this time?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. The escalation to violence that we saw on February 24th was a shock across the region. You could read it on the faces, in the voices, in the responses, that people didn't anticipate this kind of reality that we're living in right now. And then quickly, the countries in Central Europe on the border of Ukraine, there has been a fervent support on every level to welcome and organize for the needs of the arriving refugees. For many of our Lutheran Church partners in the region, the ministry to welcome in migrants and refugees is an ongoing priority. This is not new for them. And some of the challenges of this time is just the sheer number of people arriving from Ukraine. And so it's an atmosphere I would describe as urgent welcome that sits alongside grief for the impacts of the violence and concerns of events unfolding. And perhaps maybe what I think of is if you're from a small town maybe, or in a big city that feels like a small community, and you've witnessed what it can look like for people to come together and rally support for people in their time of crisis. This is what we see repeated over and over again across the regions with our partners as they work together to provide this welcome.
Thank you, Rachel. I also want to welcome Rafael Malpica Padilla, who's the Executive Director for the Service and Justice area of the ELCA, in which Lutheran Disaster Response has its home and its framing for the response to disaster. Rafael, in the context of both this total shock and almost disbelief of what's happened, and then this response to welcome, we come equipped with relationships, I think, in the area. And that accompaniment is our strength, and the assurance that the church is there before the disaster has happened, in the context of the crisis, and will continue to be there as an abiding presence is our strength. So who is it that's on the ground? How are we present in the context of Eastern Europe?
Thank you, Dan, for this opportunity to share information with our viewers. The response mechanism that we used in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America is dependent on the relationships that we have with our companion churches. In this case, with our companion churches in Eastern Europe. We have long-standing relationships with the churches in Poland, in Hungary, in Romania, and Slovakia, and now recently with the church in the Ukraine. So we use the mechanisms that these churches have in place to address human need and suffering within their own countries, and now when we are seeing people coming into their borders. So we are present through our church, companion churches. That is the beauty of being part of the community of Christ in general, the church with capital C. And then in these Lutheran communities, when we talk of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in, and that preposition is really important because in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Poland, all of us are together there, as well as in Romania, in Slovakia, in Hungary, and in the Ukraine. So we are there together through the churches. We are there through the Lutheran World Federation. We are there through other companions, such as Church World Service, with offices in Moldova and in other regions, and through one of our full communion companions from the United States, the Presbyterian Church USA, who is also relating to some of their companions. So we are present through this gift of relationships and the networks that we built around those relationships.
Thank you, Raphael. Rachel, so we have our siblings in Eastern Europe. They are our family. How are they responding? How are they capable of responding to what seems unanticipated and unbelievable, almost unimaginable in the midst of this?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. You know, I wish everyone could see the grassroots, the on-the-ground efforts complemented by organizational efforts that are being implemented here. It's not just organizations, it's not just pastors or leaders of congregations, it is the whole community gathering together, sorting out donations, providing rides to people from the border, opening their homes to refugees coming in. You know, one example, an organization that we work with, a small nonprofit here in Budapest, Hungary, named Pirna Mensa, has given their office spaces for one of the Roma families that they work with and know to stay. Bishop Tamás Fabani of the Lutheran Church in Hungary personally visited and welcomed the students from Nigeria who were studying in Ukraine when the violence erupted, and who were welcomed by the Lutheran Church in Hungary and are staying in seminary housing here in Budapest. You know, the response, it feels personal. And across the region, you can see the particular care for small children. As you've probably seen, many of the refugees coming in are women and small children. And if you've seen the photo in the news outlets of the strollers being left at the train station in Poland, arriving for mothers and children, that's just one example. Here in Hungary, at Nyugati station, in addition to water and food, diapers, local information, hygiene kits for those arriving, you also find a booth of small toys that was locally donated and are being handed out to kids as they arrive. There's one congregation here who gathered the supplies when they learned that one of the 4-year-olds who was arriving and would be hosted in their congregation was having a birthday, so that she could have some kind of sense of normality in all of this. So these are the kind of personalized, local, contextual efforts to respond to this crisis that we're seeing, you know, everywhere across the region. As people come together to respond to the acute needs of these vulnerable families and individuals. I wish everyone could see it, and the collaboration to respond to these needs now, and then holding that intention with planning and strategizing for the future, to rent storage spaces, to replenish supplies, looking ahead to when the people are still arriving, and eventually free housing will run out. So organizing, what do we need to rent for housing, expanding capacity for psychosocial care, for pastoral care, legal assistance. It's comprehensive, and it's personal at the same time.
Thank you, Rachel. I think this is a good time for me to just personally thank, and for all of us to express our appreciation for the prayers for the people in the United States and around the church, and for the outpouring of support and continued outpouring of support as you've indicated will be necessary as we chart the course ahead, as our companions chart their ministry ahead. the willingness of folks to stand together in the midst of this, and the curiosity that has brought people to this event today. In that regard, Raphael, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about where you're seeing the planning moving forward, or how you're seeing the actions moving forward as we walk alongside and are represented in the presence of this situation through our companions and partner organizations.
Yes, we have right now moving into the immediate response, and that is a response for the next 3 to 6 months. During this time, we are supporting the local churches as they are on the front line receiving this influx of refugees from the Ukraine. They are receiving them, providing them with food, clothing, hygiene, kids, shelter. Many of the churches there are turning their basements into shelter facilities. We are supporting the small number of pastors inside the Ukraine with the Lutheran Church in the Ukraine to continue to support the people that remain there. As Rachel mentioned, that psychosocial component is really important. How these pastors, our shepherds, are accompanying the people and supporting people to deal with this trauma that they are experiencing on their day-to-day basis. At the same time that we are doing that, we are supporting the Lutheran World Federation that has a vast experience in international disaster response. And we are bringing the resources of the Department for World Service in the Lutheran World Federation to work with our companion churches and members of the LWF there, and also supporting some other organizations from the ecumenical family that are working there, such as the Action of Churches Together, and as I mentioned before, Church World Service. So that is our immediate response to this crisis. However, we need to start thinking now about the next steps, because it looks like once the war is over and the shooting is over, there is a major reconstruction work that has to happen. And for that, we need to bring together all of these resources to plan for the long haul. That's the advantage we have as we relate through the churches. Organizations may come and go depending on the resources that they have or the interest span they have, but the churches, they remain there. They accompany the people because they are the community that gathers to support the people there, and we will be there with them for the long haul.
Thank you for that vision, for that idea of where we're going. I want to thank the folks who have joined us today. If you have questions that you'd like to be addressed, please use the chat function or send a message in the Facebook Live event. And we're going to continue with just a couple other questions. Rachel, we know that now there's about 15% of the population in Ukraine are displaced either internally or have gone to other countries, the largest portion being to Poland, where now over 5% of the people who are in Poland are refugees from or displaced from Ukraine. You know, you've detailed some of the ways that people have been welcomed, some of the ways that resources have been able to be shared cross-border. I think Raphael, the ways in which shared about the ways in which those who are in the church, in the Lutheran Church in Ukraine, continue to be present with neighbors and so on. But most of us watching the news are overwhelmed with the reality of the weight of this event. And I'm wondering, as you are so present and spending every waking hour on this with fewer sleeping hours these days, when you have a moment to pause, where are you finding hope?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. You know, when I think about hope in situations like this, a place that and conversations that come to mind is when I listen to our partners kind of understanding the acute trauma that is being experienced by people across the region, and the need for space that is safe, for a place to take a breath, and to rest. And I've heard that when in these plans, when people say like, what do the arriving people need? You know, they need a place where they can catch their breath. And so I find a lot of hope in that, in this intentional creation of space for to remember that God is on the road, that God is present in the violence, in the crisis, and in the moments of rest. And so I hope as we seek to connect with the healing and with the pain of people in the region, that we can remember, when we remember ourselves, to rest, when to take a breath, and to care for ourselves so we can care for others. I find real hope in the sustainability of that response.
Thank you. That is a beautiful pastoral word in the midst of that. And I think, turning to Pastor Malpica Padilla, where do you see God in the midst of this time and the journey that we're on, this unexpected and unwanted journey in which we find ourselves?
I see God walking with the refugees, with the people that have been displaced. I see God at work in the families that are opening their homes in Poland, in Hungary, in Slovakia, in Romania. I see God in the volunteers serving with churches, institutions, with the Red Cross, giving of their time, their care for those people that now are coming their way. I see God dying in the streets of the Ukraine. And the source of hope is that God is in the midst of God's people. And God has gifted us with many gifts, financial resources that people are sharing with us that enable us to respond in the way that we are responding and planning to do. But most of us, God has given us the gift of love. And love is, as one New Testament scholar defined it, stubborn, unwavering commitment. That's where I see hope. The love of God living in and through us, with the people that are dying in the streets of the Ukraine, with the president of a country that is trying to find solutions for this huge situation that he has in his hands. I see hope in the followers of Jesus coming together to pray. And when we come together and pray, and I will encourage you to pray, my friends, I want to remind you of what His Holiness Pope Francis has said about prayer. He has said, pray for the hungry, and pray for those who are suffering. Then go feed them, care for them, and your prayers will be answered. My friends, we are acting on our prayers. We are acting on our prayers with that stubborn, unwavering commitment that is taking us to receive the refugees, to feed them, to clothe them, to walk with them, to embrace them in God's name, and try together to find solutions so that they can return home. And when they return home, as the prophet Nehemiah said many years ago, come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. We will walk with the people of the Ukraine to rebuild their homes and their lives. That's where I see God. That's where our hope lies, in the God of life, who is present even in the midst of death.
And all I can say to that is, so let it be. Amen. I want to thank everyone who's joined us here today. I'm privileged to be able to bring a word not only of gratitude for the ways in which this church has stood together in generosity in amidst a time like this, but I hope this gives all of us some insight into what it means that the ELCA has chosen to have a church organization, part of its organization, to operate and to work as church in the midst of times of crisis. You'll see on your screen an address that's elca.org/disaster. It's not only a way to continue to get updates, it's also a way to give for the work that's going on and will continue to go on. You have our commitment that our journey in solidarity and accompaniment is a long journey, to stand with people in prayer, to listen to stories, to walk that journey because it's our story as well. We thank you for the ways that you support this work. We'd be glad to hear in the comment section today if you have specific topics that you'd like to address, and if you'd like for us to continue to have events like this as Facebook Live events. So once more, Raphael, Rachel, thank you for your time, for your leadership, for your servant hearts in the midst of this journey that we are on together. Peace be with us all. Amen.
Amen.